Have you ever felt like you carry an invisible mark that drives people away before they even really get to know you? That weight in your chest when you enter a room and notice the looks that shift, the conversations that stop, the smiles that fade in your presence. It's as if there's something in you that silently screams to the world, keep your distance. You try to smile, you try to be kind, you try to fit in, but it's like there's an invisible glass wall between you and the rest of humanity. People see through it, but they can never really touch it. And the worst part is that you don't always know what that thing is that you carry, that mysterious trait that seems to condemn you to a life of perpetual exclusion. Franz Kafka knew intimately this feeling. This condition of being perpetually the stranger, even in one's own land, the outcast even among those who should be one's fellow man. Today we're going to explore these silent traits that may be keeping you trapped in a circle of loneliness, and more importantly, how recognizing them can be the first step to breaking this pattern that hurts you so much. If this feeling of permanent exclusion echoes in your heart, I want you to know that you are not alone on this journey. This channel was created exactly for people like you, who feel like they carry something indefinable that separates them from the world. Here together, we will unravel the mysteries of the human soul, explore the depths of existential experience, and find paths to genuine transformation. If you're tired of pretending that everything is fine when inside you feel this emptiness of not belonging anywhere, subscribe to the channel and activate the bell, because every week we bring reflections that can illuminate the darkest corners of the human experience. And if this content resonates with something inside you, leave a like so that more people can find these reflections when they need them most. You don't have to go through this alone. And your presence here makes a difference in the lives of others who share this same silent pain. There is something deeply disturbing about the condition of the perpetually excluded, an almost ghostly quality that Kafka masterfully captured in his works. The excluded live in a constant state of almost belonging, always on the edge of groups, always watching life happen through a window that never opens completely to them. It's like there's a secret language that everyone speaks fluently except him. Gestures, looks, pauses in speech, a whole symphony of social signals that seem as natural to others as breathing, but that for the excluded remain indecipherable hieroglyphs of a world that he observes but never truly accesses. The first trait that may be condemning you to this perpetual exclusion is something we call unregulated intensity. Have you ever noticed how some people manage to modulate their energy according to the environment, like emotional chameleons that adapt perfectly to the collective mood? Unregulated intense, on the other hand, is like a light bulb that only has two settings, off or dazzling. When you are excited, your energy can be overwhelming, almost aggressive in its passion, causing others to instinctively back away. When he is melancholy, his sadness fills the room like a dense fog, creating a palpable discomfort that makes people want to escape. This intensity is not malicious. On the contrary, it often comes from a place of deep authenticity, an inability to be superficial or performative. But the human social world works largely through subtle performances, carefully calibrated social masks, and those who are unable or unwilling to wear these masks often find themselves excluded from their innermost circles. Another devastating trait is excessively sharp perception. Kafka spoke of a sensitivity that was both a gift and a curse, the ability to see through social facades with an almost painful clarity. The overly perceptive catches the gentle lies, the cordial falsehoods, the subtle manipulations that lubricate the wheels of social life. He sees when someone is feigning interest, when a smile doesn't reach their eyes, when a laugh is forced. This emotional hypervigilance, this ability to read between the lines of human communication, should be an advantage, but it often becomes a burden. Because when you can see the deceit behind the kindness, when you see the hidden agendas behind the sweet words, it becomes almost impossible to participate in the social game with the necessary naivety. You become that person who asks uncomfortable questions, who points out elephants in the room, who can't simply accept social conventions without questioning them. And this, paradoxically, makes you seen as inconvenient, as someone who unnecessarily complicates the simple things in life. Brutal honesty is another trait that may be isolating you without you even realizing it. We live in a society built on small social lies, on euphemisms and half-truths that make coexistence smoother. When someone asks how you are, you expect a, "Well, how about you?" Automatic, not a sincere account of his existential struggles. When someone shows a photo, you expect a gentle compliment, not an honest, critical analysis. The brutally honest cannot participate in these rituals of cordial falsehood. He answers questions with disconcerting sincerity, offers unsolicited opinions, refuses to engage in superficial conversations that he considers a waste of time. This honesty comes from a place of integrity, from a deep inability to be false, but the practical result is that people come to see you as unpredictable, potentially dangerous to their fragile egos. They prefer the company of those who know when to lie gently, when to omit inconvenient truths, when to show interest in things that do not genuinely interest them. And you, have you ever felt this weight of always being the one who unintentionally bothers you, who tells the truth when everyone prefers a comfortable lie? That feeling that you carry something that makes people pull away even when all you want is true connection. If you are experiencing this right now, if you recognize these traits in yourself, leave in the comments, "I see through the masks." Your courage in recognizing yourself may be exactly what someone else needs to understand, that they are not alone in this journey of being too intense for a world that prefers superficiality. The fourth trait that often condemns someone to social ostracism is the need for depth in a world that cultivates superficiality. Imagine a person who cannot participate in conversations about the weather, about celebrities, about the little everyday dramas that take up so much space in human social interaction. For this person, these topics are not only uninteresting, they are almost physically painful, like being forced to eat tasteless food when one is hungry for a rich, complex feast. She longs for conversations about the meaning of existence, about the mysteries of consciousness, about the fundamental contradictions of the human condition. But when you try to steer conversations into these deeper territories, you're often met with uncomfortable looks, abrupt changes of subject, or worse yet, the silent label of heavy or complicated. This need for substance is not pretentiousness, it is like a spiritual thirst that cannot be quenched with empty talk. But in a culture that values lightness over depth, those who can't be superficial when necessary often find themselves excluded from more casual social circles. Existential melancholy is another trait that can create an invisible barrier between you and others. We're not talking about clinical depression, but that philosophical sadness that Kafka knew so well, an acute awareness of the transience of all things, the fundamental absurdity of existence, the essential loneliness of the human condition. This melancholy is not chosen. It is simply there, like a constant shadow that colors all experiences. When others are celebrating small victories, the existential melancholic cannot help but think about the fleetingness of these moments of joy. When others make excited plans for the future, he cannot ignore the fundamental uncertainty that surrounds all human projects. This perspective is not necessarily pessimistic. It is often accompanied by a deeper appreciation of the beauty and rarity of genuine moments of connection and meaning. But to those around, it may seem as if this person is always bringing the mood down, always reminding them of realities they would rather ignore. Excessive sensitivity to the rhythms and energies of environments is another often underestimated exclusion factor. Some people are like emotional sponges, unconsciously absorbing the moods, tensions, and unspoken energies of the spaces they inhabit. In an environment charged with unexpressed conflict, they feel a physical anxiety, an urgent need to escape. In groups where there is falsehood or manipulation, they experience a kind of emotional nausea. This sensitivity can make them unable to function normally in many social contexts. They may need to leave parties early, avoid certain groups, decline invitations to events they know will be emotionally exhausting. In the eyes of others, this may appear antisocial, selective, even arrogant. But for those who live this reality, it is a matter of emotional survival, of preserving their sanity in a world that often seems energetically toxic. Paralyzing perfectionism can also create a pattern of social exclusion. The perfectionist person is unable to participate in activities where they may not stand out. They are unable to initiate conversations where they may not be eloquent. They are unable to expose themselves in situations where they may not have full control of the outcome. This perfectionism is not vanity. It is often a form of protection developed in response to old wounds, an attempt to avoid rejection by being blameless. But the practical result is social paralysis, an inability to spontaneously engage with other imperfect human beings doing imperfect things in imperfect ways. The perfectionist becomes trapped in a cycle where, to avoid rejection, they avoid connection, and by avoiding connection, they ensure their own exclusion. The inability to adapt to the tribal rituals of modern socialization is another trait that can keep someone perpetually left out. Each social group has its unwritten codes, its slang, its shared references, its rituals of belonging. For some, learning and executing these codes is natural, almost instinctive. For others, it's like trying to learn a complex dance when everyone else is born knowing the steps. They may understand intellectually what is happening, but they cannot incorporate these patterns in a fluid and natural way. They're always a step behind, always missing inside jokes, always seeming slightly out of place, even when they're doing their best to fit in. The need for authenticity in a world of performance is perhaps one of the most isolating traits of all. We live in an era of carefully curated identities where people present edited versions of themselves in virtually every social interaction. The authentic person is unable or unwilling to participate in this theater. She can't feign enthusiasm for things that don't interest her. She can't adopt popular opinions she doesn't share. She can't perform a more palatable version of herself for social consumption. This authenticity should be valued, but it is often perceived as a form of implicit moral superiority, as if the person is silently judging those who choose to be more performative in their social interactions. What makes this condition even more Kafkaesque is that often the very attempt to correct these traits can intensify exclusion. When someone consciously tries to be less intense, they often only succeed in appearing repressed or insincere. When you try to be less honest, you can seem manipulative in a way you weren't before. When you try to be more superficial, it can come across as condescending or forced. It's as if there is an inherent quality of authenticity that cannot be easily masked, and any attempt to do so only draws more attention to the fundamental difference that exists between that person and those who navigate the social world with greater natural ease. Kafka understood that sometimes exclusion is not a problem to be solved, but an existential condition to be accepted, and eventually transformed into a unique form of participation in the world. The excluded can develop a perspective that those who have always been within social circles can never have. He can see patterns that are invisible to those immersed in them, can develop deep compassion for excluded others. It can create art, literature, philosophy that resonates with everyone who has ever felt like an outsider looking in. Transformation doesn't necessarily come from becoming more palatable to others, but from finding those few who can see beyond the surface, who value depth over ease, authenticity over performance. These rare but deep relationships can be infinitely more satisfying than dozens of superficial connections. The excluded can learn to value quality over quantity, substance over popularity. There is also the possibility of finding ways to channel these problematic traits in directions that benefit both the individual and the broader community. Unregulated intensity can become creative passion. Keen perception can become counseling wisdom. Brutal honesty can become moral leadership. The need for depth can become transformative teaching. Existential melancholy can become touching art. Oversensitivity can become empathic healing. Perhaps the most important thing is to recognize that these traits are not defects to be corrected, but characteristics to be understood, accepted, and eventually integrated in a healthy way into one's own life. Social exclusion can be painful, but it can also be the price of an authenticity that, although rare, is infinitely more valuable than acceptance obtained through the sacrifice of who we really are. In a world that often rewards conformity, those who carry these traits may represent something essential that humanity needs. The reminder that there is more depth, more complexity, more mystery to the human experience than our culture of superficiality would like to admit. The journey of the perpetually excluded is not about finding ways to fit in, but about finding ways to belong so completely that external approval becomes not only unnecessary, but irrelevant. It's about discovering that the feeling of not belonging anywhere can eventually transform into the freedom to belong anywhere where authenticity is valued above social convenience.